The sun did not nearly shine on Vashti. It seemed to perform for her, acting as a celestial spotlight that followed her every move. As she stepped out of her matte black G-Wagon, the heavy humidity of the afternoon did nothing to dampen the silk of her skin or the precision of her presence. Vashti was not simply a beautiful woman. She was a biological event, a phenomenon of nature that demanded observation. Her skin was the color of roasted cocoa beans, polished to a high, reflective shine, and her eyes held a predatory amber glow, a gaze that made powerful men forget their names, their obligations, and their histories. Vashti's wealth was not a product of inheritance, nor was it earned in the sterile confines of a boardroom. It was harvested. She possessed a psychological gravity so potent that it functioned as a voluntary tax on the male ego. At 32, she was the mistress of 3 penthouses, a fleet of luxury vehicles she rarely bothered to drive, and a bank account fueled by the contributions of men who had once been sensible fathers, respected leaders, and pillars of their respective communities. In her wake, marriages didn't just stumble, they evaporated like mist in a furnace. Her empire was built on 3 tiers of devotion. First, there were the CEOs, men who had built corporate dynasties only to hand over the keys to their accounts just to witness the curve of her smile. Then there were the guardians, a rotating team of former special forces operators who worked for her without pay, content to breathe the air she exhaled. Finally, there were the domesticated, men like her personal chef, a Michelin-starred juror who had abandoned his family in Europe because Vashti once remarked that his soufflé was adequate. To the wives of the city's elite, Vashti was known as the Great Eclipse. When she entered a room, women instinctively moved to stand in front of their husbands, shielding them like fragile glass from a heat wave. They knew that a single, calculated look from Vashti could undo 20 years of loyalty and domestic peace. The decline began on a humid Tuesday at a high society charity gala. Vashti arrived with her signature calculated tardiness, draped in a gown fashioned from emerald stones, and whispered promises. She scanned the room, her amber eyes searching for her next project. They landed on Sani. He was the prize of the season, a telecommunications mogul of astronomical wealth, known for his unwavering, almost legendary devotion to his wife, Emma. While other men of his status strayed as a matter of course, Sani was famously boring in his faithfulness. To Vashti, this was not a sign of moral virtue. It was a challenge to her sovereignty. It was a lock that no one had been able to pick, and she intended to shatter it. She approached him with the practiced grace of a predator. She didn't lead with a conversational line. She led with her scent, a primal, intoxicating mixture of sandalwood, oud, and a hint of something metallic. "Mr. Sani," she purred, her voice a low-frequency vibration, "I've heard you're the only man in this city who doesn't have a price." In any other circumstance, a man would have tripped over his tongue or flushed with a mixture of shame and desire, but Sani's reaction was terrifyingly absent. His eyes remained strangely vacant, fixed on a point just above Vashti's shoulder. His heart rate didn't spike, his pupils didn't dilate. "Excuse me," he said, his voice flat and mechanical, as if he were reading from a script. "My wife is calling me." Vashti blinked. He hadn't even looked at her. He hadn't scanned her face or acknowledged the magnetic pull she had spent a lifetime perfecting. He walked away from her as if she were a piece of common, uninteresting furniture. Standing by the buffet was Emma. By the standards of the elite, she was plain. She was dressed in a simple, unadorned dress, her hair tied in a neat, unremarkable style. She wore no diamonds, and she lacked Vashti's intoxicating golden glow. But as Vashti watched, Emma reached out and touched Sani's wrist. The effect was instantaneous. The billionaire went still, dropping his head like a well-trained hound. Then Emma looked across the room directly at Vashti. She didn't look threatened and she didn't look insecure. She smiled, a slow, chilling curl of the lips that held no warmth in the eyes. "You have the beauty of the earth, Vashti," Emma whispered as she passed her later that evening, her voice sounding like dry leaves scraping against a gravestone. "But I have the keys to his soul. You are fighting nature. I am using the spirits." Vashti became obsessed. For the first time in her life, a man had denied her, and the rejection felt like a physical wound. She began to pour her vast resources into winning Sani. She sent him luxury gifts, watches that cost more than country estates. They were returned, unopened and unacknowledged. She showed up at his office, but the security guards, men who usually would have been her devoted slaves, blocked her path with blank, unseeing stares. Then the Vashti magic began to sour. It started with her reflection. One morning, the woman who was a biological event woke up to find her skin looking grey and sallow. A fine line appeared on her forehead, then another. When she called her volunteer driver to take her to the spa, the line was dead. She checked her bank accounts. The men who usually replenished her funds fit suddenly and simultaneously woken up. A high-ranking official called her, weeping with a frantic, desperate clarity, demanding the return of a property deed he'd given her. He claimed his eyes were finally open. Her chef quit, claiming his sense of smell had returned and that her kitchen now felt like a tomb. The beauty that had been her armor was thinning. Every time she tried to focus her charms on a new target, she felt a sharp, stabbing pain in her chest, a rhythmic throb that seemed to match the steady, haunting heartbeat of Emma. Desperate and feeling her power draining into the very soil of the city, Vashti drove herself to Emma's private residence. She expected a palace of dark arts. Instead, she found a small, dark house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac smelling of sulfur and heavy incense. Emma was waiting on the porch. Beside her sat Sani, staring into space, peeling an orange with eerie, repetitive precision. "What did you do to me?" Vashti screamed, her voice cracking. "My men are leaving. My money is vanishing. My face, look at what is happening to me." Emma stood up. "Men are weak, Vashti. They follow beauty until something stronger pulls the leash. You used your body, a temporary loan from the sun. I used the ancestors. I tied my husband's shadow to my own. And because you tried to break what I bound, I decided to take back the favor the universe gave you." Emma leaned in, her breath cold. "Beauty is a loan, Vashti, and your interest is due." Within a month, the goddess had become a ghost story. Her G-Wagon was repossessed. Her penthouses were locked by court orders as wives filed massive lawsuits for the ruin of their homes. Vashti moved into a small, cramped apartment in a part of town where the street lights were perpetually broken. She still had her features. The nose was the same, the eyes were the same, but the light was gone. When she walked down the street, men didn't fall at her feet. They walked past her as if she were invisible. Or worse, they looked at her with a vague sense of pity, as if they were looking at a flower that had been pressed in a book and forgotten. Sitting on her small balcony, watching the sunset, Vashti realized that her wealth hadn't been built on gold, but on the fragile, fickle desires of men, desires that could be snapped by a woman who knew how to pull the strings of the unseen world. She realized that fighting Emma was like trying to punch the wind. At dawn, the hour when the physical and spiritual worlds are said to shake hands, Vashti arrived at Emma's gate. She didn't arrive in a convoy. She arrived in a hired, beat-up car, clutching a designer handbag that contained the last of her dignity and a significant bundle of cash. Emma was sitting on a low wooden stool. She didn't look up. "The peacock has lost its feathers," she said. "Why are you here, Vashti?" Vashti sank to her knees, the dust of the yard staining her clothes. "I was a fool," she whispered. "I thought beauty was the ultimate power. But I want a root, Emma. I want to know how you hold the soul, not just the eyes." Emma finally looked up. Her eyes were milky and distant. "You want to trade your vanity for authority," she stated. "But authority has a price. To tie a man's spirit, you must first surrender your own freedom. You will belong to the craft." "Teach me," Vashti pleaded. "I will pay whatever you ask. I will be your student, your daughter in the dark. Just don't let me become ordinary."
A month later, a rumor swept through the high society lounges. Vashti was back. But this new Vashti didn't laugh. Her beauty had returned, but it was sharper, colder, almost metallic. When she walked into a room, men didn't just admire her, they felt an irrational magnetic pull toward her that bordered on fear. She moved back into a penthouse, but the decor had changed to heavy dark velvets, and the scent of expensive perfume was layered over a faint metallic smell of iron. Every first Saturday of the month, her matte black G-Wagon, restored and shinier than ever, would pull up to that small house in the cul-de-sac. Vashti would emerge, carrying a briefcase. Inside were the spoils of her new life, titles to lands, jewelry stripped from the safes of mesmerized men, and stacks of foreign currency. She would enter Emma's house, bow her head, and place the briefcase at the older woman's feet. "The harvest is plenty, mother," Vashti would say, her eyes glowing with a dark, unnatural light. "Good," Ma would reply. "Go back out. There is a man of influence returning to the city tomorrow. Show him that his strength belongs to us." The final truth was revealed on a rainy Tuesday, deep within the walls of Ma's home. Vashti had come to deliver the largest tribute yet, the deed to a shipping terminal. As she waited in the dim hallway, the door to the back room sat slightly ajar. From within, she heard the sound of genuine, hearty laughter, a sound she had never heard from the stoic Ma. "Another one, my love," a voice boomed. Vashti froze. It was Sunny, but his voice wasn't flat or mechanical. It was vibrant and sharp. She peered through the crack. Sunny wasn't staring into space like a zombie. He was sitting at a mahogany desk, scrolling through a digital bank ledger on a tablet, while Ma sat on the arm of his chair, massaging his shoulders. "The girl is efficient," Ma said, her voice stripped of its mystical gravel, sounding like a high-level corporate strategist. "She brought in a fortune in assets this quarter alone. The spell I cast on you really broke her spirit. She's so terrified of losing her beauty that she doesn't realize she's just our most profitable employee." Sunny chuckled. "It was a brilliant play, Ma. Let her think I was tied by witchcraft, so she'd come crawling to you for the secret. Now she does all the dirty work of seducing the competition, and we collect the dividends without ever staining our own reputations." Vashti's heart turned to ice. There was no witchcraft. There was no ancient root. Ma and Sunny were a team, a power couple who had mastered the ultimate con. They knew that people believed more in the supernatural than in cold-blooded psychology. They had staged Sunny's trance. They had used their massive corporate influence to shadow ban Vashti from her accounts, making it look like a curse was taking hold. They had broken her down until she begged to be their puppet. The homage Vashti paid wasn't to a deity, it was a franchise fee. She was the face of their empire, the honey trap they sent out to ruin their rivals, while they sat back and played the roles of the pious husband and the traditional wife. Vashti looked down at her hands. They were still beautiful, but she realized she was trapped in a prison of her own vanity. If she tried to leave or expose them, they would simply flip the switch again, bankrupting her, ruining her face through mysterious ailments which she now realized were likely slow-acting toxins in the teas Ma gave her, and leaving her for dead. She had spent her life thinking she was the hunter, only to find out she was the prize hound on a very expensive leash. She took a deep breath, wiped a stray tear that threatened to ruin her designer makeup, and knocked on the door. "Mother," Vashti called out, her voice masking the tremor of her soul. "I have the tribute." Inside, Ma's face instantly shifted back into the mask of the mystical matriarch. Sunny's eyes went blank and dull. "Enter, my daughter," Ma croaked. Vashti stepped and knelt, placing the wealth of a broken man at the feet of the billionaires. She smiled, for she was still the most beautiful woman in the city. She still had the money, the connections, and the attention of men. She was a highly decorated ghost in a game she never really owned, and for Vashti, that was enough.